This is going to be a short summary, an accessible overview of a second paper that I've had published from my PhD research, which is in the Incarceration Journal and titled Desistance Habitus, Strategically Using Experience in Practice. Now, before we get into the actual paper, what I wanted to do is talk about the driver behind me wanting to do my PhD topic and focus on peer mentors or people with lived experience of criminal justice in practice, is because in 2007 I joined the Leeds Youth Justice Service as a volunteer and quickly became a professional. And although the professionals that I worked with, my professional peers, so to speak, had to help me develop my knowledge of identifying risk, managing risk, delivering intervention plans, producing pre-sentence reports for court, for example, and supervising statutory court orders, the one thing that I actually arrived into practice with was an ability to develop authentic and legitimate relationships with the young people that I was working with as a result of me going through the similar experiences that they had experienced. And so although I undertook a systematic literature review, and within that review I found that there are many subjective benefits for both mentees and mentors that help towards the desistance process, i.e. having a crime-free life, which were reduce stigma, develop pro-social identities, develop pro-social attitudes, enhance coping strategies and develop social capital. What I found interesting was the sheer lack of attention or focus on the skills, knowledge and competencies that people like me arrive into criminal justice practice with, and how that can manifest into authentic, legitimate relationships with young people or people involved in offending, because you've gone through the same social fields that they're actually participating in at the moment. Having found this gap, so to speak, it has, however, introduced me to Pierre Bourdieu, who's a well-cited sociologist and anthropologist, to his ideas of how people do social practice, how he would explain it. So he's coined lots of terms, complicated terms like habitus and capital, that explain how we have a resource of knowledge. It's not necessarily academic knowledge, but we develop through our cultural experiences, our relationships with others, our navigating different social fields like being involved in criminality or being incarcerated, for example. And that can manifest into a habitus, habits, predispositions, way of behaving with other people that can be recognised and legitimised in different social spaces. So the best way to explain habitus is through his most famous quote. When habitus encounters a social world of which it is a product, it finds itself as a fish in water. It does not feel the weight of the water and takes the world around itself for granted. So, i.e., if you've been a criminal like I have and been in criminal spaces, if you then go back into those criminal spaces, you won't be like a fish out of water. You will take that environment around yourself for granted. However, in the 4 years I was in prison, it was very easy to identify someone who would be what you would call a fish out of water. So when I went into criminal justice practice, one of the things that I realised now that I was doing is I was using my habitus without communicating to the young people that I worked with that I'd been involved in criminality or been in the incarceration experience. I would walk into a room and strategically use my habitus to obtain legitimacy, credibility and trust from those young people. Now that is a strategic use of a practice tool that's got very little attention or investigation in peer mentor investigation. Now, as a result of uncovering this lack of attention, lack of focus, I feel I've been quite privileged actually, because whilst I was in practice, I wrote 2 books. The second one actually accessed young people's voices about what it was like to work with somebody who'd gone through the incarceration experience. And so I was able to capitalise on that and use it as data. It's a methodology called autoethnography, which allows previously subjugated groups to have a voice because they're able to use their own cultural experiences and bring it to the literature, which has been fascinating for me. The other thing I've been able to do is capitalise on previous criminologists who've used Pierre Bourdieu's ideas of social practice to explain criminality. So, for example, Sam Bird talked about street capital, how language and behaviours can develop certain capitals in criminal spaces in Oslo, in Norway, for example. Caputo Levine, in her PhD research, talked about yard face and how being incarcerated can develop into a carceral habitus. She thought it was negative and it makes it difficult for people to integrate back into society. I agree with parts of that, but peer mentors show that it's not all negative because that experience can be used positively. Alistair Fraser then coined the term street habitus, which also Loic Wacant spoke about, and that's the idea of social space becoming integral to identity. So what I've been able to do is synthesize my autoethnographic data, my previous experiences, etc., these criminological ideas, and I've coined the term desistance habitus, which is a solution-focused way of thinking about social practice and how people like me can use our embodied knowledge, our skills, competencies and experiences as a strategic tool to promote desistance pathways for people that are caught up in the cycles that we were once caught up in. Therefore, desistance habitus is people that have been on both sides of the desistance process, because the most interesting part is, although my criminality has stopped, I work in prisons, I work in young offenders institutions now. When I go into those fields, I'm not a fish out of water. I can adapt to those environments very quickly and pull out my experiences, my embodied knowledge to adapt to those spaces pretty quickly. The offending stops, the cultural habits remain. That's the idea of desistance habitus. It's a solution-focused way of being able to think about how people like me come into practice and bring our skills, knowledge and wisdom that's not just about being there and being a visual example of change. It's using our carceral and street embodied knowledge to obtain legitimacy and give a nod to the people. It's all right to do this desistance stuff, and you can use that as a strategic tool in practice, because relationship building is the fundamental to helping people recover or to go through the desistance process. The risk assessment bureaucratic stuff is of value and is really important, but actually if you don't have that relationship side of things, then it's hard to promote desistance. So this isn't just an add-on, this is a fundamental. Anyway, the one thing I would say is I'm really enjoying this PhD stuff, and for people that have had experiences like mine, school exclusion, criminality, addiction, incarceration, etc., when you access some of these sociological ideas, it really liberates your ability to be able to articulate things that you might not have been able to articulate, but you thought about in the past. So the next stage is for me to get my data to do some interviews with mentors, mentees, and people who've been on both sides of the experience. So if you've had any of those experiences, please get in touch with the email in the description below, and I'm excited to find out what we find next. See you soon. Bye.